And literally a couple of weeks later, we were going to see the Pistols at the 100 Club,
What
where
were the
the
Pistols
band were
like
in
when they
the
were live? Could they play? Were they good?
But 1976, I went to art school, which was the year that punk exploded. Well, it didn't explode then. It kind of started in around 75, 76. And so I very early on went to see Sex Pistols at the 100 Club with a friend of mine, Pete. We went together, and yeah, there was about 50 people in the audience. And I just started art school, and really I hadn't a clue what I was doing. And yeah, it was all very new. So I got thrown in at the deep end because we were going to see the Pistols and then the Clash. We saw them at the 100 Club Festival, and we saw them supporting each other. And we went to as many gigs as we could that particular year. And during that time, we kind of it was explosion of the amateur, really. And up until that point, we or the music industry was dominated by people like Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones, and it was, punk was the antithesis of that. It was
Yeah.
all DIY. If you could play three chords, you could start a band. Whereas, all these other bands were these virtuoso musicians, and it was all this big ivory tower that just didn't seem attainable at all to anybody, even art. And the thought that I could ever get a career out of designing album covers or whatever it was not even a consideration. So it was all like a bit of a boys' club up until then. And what was so great about punk was it meant people had to work within a limited framework. It didn't have accessibility to some of the things that people who had previous experience from, but it was this never-ending circle. You couldn't get in unless you knew somebody. You couldn't do this, and it went round and round and round. So whether you were talented or not, in certain cases, it was lost on people. So what punk did was it opened up that door. So my introduction to go and see the Pistols and the Clash and the various bands at that point was got me in, and I happened to be at art school. So my whole thing with meeting bands was, oh, you should get me to do your cover or whatever. During this period, we met Bernard Rhodes, who was Clash's notorious manager, and and he asked us to do the Clash White Man Hammersmith Palais single cover. I at this point, I'm with my friend Pete Barry. We went to art school together. Well, actually, yeah, just let me jump
That's
back.
the revolver one, isn't it?
That's the one, yeah, the gun. And this was what's so great about punk. I'd been to see David Bowie, I don't know, about a few months before that, or a month or two before that at Wembley, and it was like, I had restricted view seats, and restricted view was in the very back row at the side of the stage. So literally, the only time I saw Bowie was when he came to the front of the stage, and it was like, it was it seemed so unattainable and so distant and so a million miles from where I was from. And literally a couple of weeks later, we were going to see the Pistols at the 100 Club,
What
where
were the
the
Pistols
band were
like
in
when they
the.
were live? Could they play? Were they good, or were they
Oh
still very
yeah, I
raw?
mean, I mean, it wasn't. It really. Yeah, they were great, but and I mean, I love David Bowie, and I still love David Bowie, and his show was brilliant. It was a thin white Duke tour, and it was all that. He had the black waistcoat on, the white shirt, and the Gitan cigarettes, and then, but it was so far away from where you were. I couldn't imagine ever even being anywhere near there. And then the next week or two, or wherever it was, we were sitting this band who was standing next to us in the audience who just get up on the stage and play. There's no doubt that their effect, well, on me and the people, because this is before anybody knew what punk was, before it became the cartoon image it later became. This was really more of an art school movement than anything else. A bunch of dispossessed kids who were going to art school who love Roxy and Bowie and wanted to do something else. So when they got on the stage, yeah, they were just something that you'd never seen before. It was, and you felt to be part of that. You knew there was something important about it, because literally every week we go there, more bands were coming up, and of course the Clash, who we did get to work with, and that was Bernie Rhodes. We actually used to, me and Pete used to hitch to go and see them play. We'd hitch to wherever it was, Manchester or Birmingham. We could really got into Clash because Pistols weren't playing that much, really at that point. And so we went to see the Clash, and one day we were at Birmingham. We used to hitch to places, and then we didn't know where we were going to stay. We just at the end of the show, we'd say, "Can we crash on your floor?" or whatever, and people would say no or yes. And one day we're trying to get a ride back to London, and this guy called Mickey Foot, who was the Clash's sound mixer, live sound mixer, and he told Bernie, and Bernie was the Clash manager. Bernie, infamous for having the Clash, the old Renault with the license plate CLA5H on the back of it, and so he said, "I'll give you guys a lift back to London." And we kind of thought, because we had no concept of who a manager was. I mean, we weren't stupid. I mean, we knew, record covers were a big thing. We'd read about who was engineer, who played bass, whatever record. So we had a sense of what it was, but it was still a big mystery. And so he gave me and Pete a lift back to London. Well, actually, we lived in St. Albans at that point. And St. Albans was, obviously, it's about a 20-minute train drive from London to St. Albans. But we didn't want to tell Bernie we were from St. Albans because it didn't seem very cool to be from St. Albans. So we got a lift back to London, and as we're on the M1 driving back, we drove right past St. Albans. So we got he drops us off at Euston Station, and we had to sleep on the platform and get the train back to St. Albans in the morning. But on the way down, and I've always had a soft spot for Bernie. He told us his manifesto, the Clash manifesto, which was is a very almost Marxist. Like, this is what the Clash are about. It's not just a band. It's like the four guys on stage. It's the people do the sound. It's the people do the clothes. And it was great. It was revolutionary. I mean, it was absolute revolutionary. It was like, we're going to take over. We're going to show these people that we run. He was very, very articulate about it, and so so we're listening to this stuff. We had no clue why he was telling us this, and he said, well, we're looking for a new single cover for White Man in Hammersmith Palais, and Paul says, you guys are art school, so we need a cover for White Man in Hammersmith Palais, which is the record's coming out. And then we got to, so we were like, just done the Ramones, now we're about to do the Clash. It was almost like how did we? It was surreal to us, because that was the day we went from being fans, because we were fans, we were like fans. We followed the Clash around and hitched to places, and because it was such an important thing for us to do. And it was so, I mean, I remember when the Pistols first came out, like there was a few articles in the music press. One day we were out somewhere and we met these two girls, and we were talking to them, and by this point we started to look punky, but nobody knew what punk was. I mean, people used to look at us, they thought we were homeless because we'd have ripped shirts. And there's a John Ingham book called The Spirit of 76, and there's a picture of me and Pete in it. We look so young in it, and I've got a handmade New York Dolls t-shirt on it, and Pete's got a painted shirt on it because we used to paint our shirts. And we so we were, it was our look, and we loved it because nobody knew what it was, nobody knew what punk was, and so we felt like we belonged to something. I mean, that was the thing. I think everyone wants to feel like they belong to a movement, and unlike today, where kids want to fit in and they want to go with what everyone else is going to in case they feel left out, we didn't want to be like anyone else. We didn't want anyone. It was our thing, and fuck everyone else. And so we really, it was a great moment in time. So to suddenly be asked to do a Ramones t-shirt and then a Clash single cover, we couldn't believe it. So anyway, to cut a long story short, the band wanted something that was very reggae, those old reggae studios in Jamaica, and they had a look to them, and one of them was a gun. People say it was a rip-off of the Liechtenstein, and Liechtenstein was obviously a motif on it, but it really came from there's a reggae studio. So I did the front cover with the gun, and then Pete did the back cover with the target, the guy getting shot. So we did that, and I've always said this, my firsts have always been great. I mean, my first album cover was Dexys Midnight Runners. My first single cover was The Clash. and my first T-shirt was the Ramones, and my first video was Iggy Pop. So, I was very blessed to be in the right place at the right time. I didn't know what I was doing. Really didn't have a clue. Even though I was at art school, I was at the beginning of art school where they were teaching this stuff, but I was ahead of everyone else in that respect. So
it was interesting what you said about the Clash being more attainable than, say, the other acts. It's interesting you say that because I did an interview with Steve Ignorant from Crass, and he said he saw the Clash, and Joe Strummer said, if you think you can do better, you try. And that's how Crass started. So, and that obviously turned into a whole different thing with the whole Crass thing in the 80s.
That actually really was more what Bernie was talking about, what Crass became, because they became their own little industry there, totally independent of big labels and totally run their way. And that's really what Bernie wanted for the Clash. It didn't work out that way.
No.
Because once you sign to a record label like CBS, you don't really have much chance. But that's interesting. And Bernie had that attitude. So from the Clash, I love. They were one of the best bands I've ever seen play live. But they were a real pain in the neck to deal with. I mean, very prima donna-ish. I love Joe. Joe was great. Joe was actually the real thing. He was more the real thing than anybody else in the punk movement. And but because he went to boarding school and his dad was had some kind of ambassadorial job. Yeah, people said, well, he's not working class, and it wasn't about working class. It was about that. In fact, was the last thing it was about. It wasn't about any class. The whole idea was it was meant to be classless, and in the very beginning, it's actually very arty. It was only later when the media got that you saw these ridiculous liberty spikes and piercings. Nobody had a tattoo, and nobody had pierced anything back then. It was all and the reason clothes were shabby because most of these people were like myself were at art school, so you get paint on them, and so you wear clothes from thrift stores that were ripped and
John Lydon, his look was because his clothes had fallen apart and he had to hold them together with safety pins. It wasn't I hate Pink Floyd T-shirt. I think he just did it. It wasn't.
Well, he was genius for that. I mean, I Hate Pink Floyd was as a masterpiece. He did that, and he wore it better than anyone else because, Vivian Westwood, Malcolm McLaren, Rhodes, and at the time, Seditionaries at the time, was not a cheap place to buy clothes. I mean, a pair of boots back then, which I bought, was £30. That would be about the equivalent of like £200 or £300 now, and so you had these two extremes. Malcolm Vivian's clothes were brilliant and subversive and all those great things about it, and you had to be really brave to wear those things because nobody knew what it was. As soon as really, you can put it down to the Bill Grundy show. As soon as that happened, it all changed, and it all changed where it became dangerous. I got beaten up on a few occasions, and people just the hatred that people had without even understanding what it was about, and
the filth and the fury.
The filth and the fury, and you know what? And I loved all of that. I thought it was great. There was no way I was going to, even though I got beaten up by, and arrested, and God knows what else. There was no way I was going to change the way I looked because it was like I felt part of something. So basically, that's where it started. Over those periods, I was still at art school when we did the Dexys cover, and that was because Bernie Rhodes managed Dexys Midnight Runners, and it was. I did like a little bit of more on the glamorous side. I did like sexiness in music, and Dexys weren't sexy to me. The Pistols and Dexys were sexy in a different way, and so by now we've gone beyond punk, and it's all become this ridiculously over the top. Kids walking down King's Road, safety pins everywhere through their noses, and his spiky hair. That I never saw a single punk like that when it was in the begining. So
it became a caricature, didn't it?
It became a caricature, and Rotten had his spiky hair. The Clash did, and I love the Clash's painted shirts and they're writing words on shirts, and I loved all that.